Welcome back to the Student Athlete Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Lemke, and today we're joined by Sam Shomo, a National Scouting Report specialist who works extensively with athletes, particularly in volleyball. But Sam is a former college athlete and coach, so she comes at this recruiting process from multiple angles. She's not just recruiting, she has that experience at those higher levels. So today we're going to dive into the recruiting process, talking about finding the right fit, but then also talking about what are college coaches looking for and what are some ways that you can separate yourself in that recruiting process. So Sam, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Nick, I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So let's start off with setting the tone. I want to talk about the number one, like what are the stats in terms of what percentage of high school athletes are playing in college right now, or at least most recently?
Okay, so a lot of people don't realize this if they're in high school or if their child is in high school. The number of high school athletes that move on to play at the college level is actually very small. Across all sports right now, it's an average of about 5%. There's some sports where it's a little higher than that, not higher than 10%. And there's some sports where it's a little lower, right? So for example, I do a lot of work in women's volleyball. I work with a lot of women's volleyball athletes. About 7% of women's volleyball players in high school go on to play at the college level. That's Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, and the NAIA all combined. So if you're doing the math at home, right, that's 7 out of 100, which isn't that high. And there's actually some other sports where it's even lower. It's just showing you how hard it is to get recruited. The Division 1 level is actually only 1% of athletes will go on. So again, if you're doing the math at home, 1 out of 100 are going to be recruited and go on to play at the Division 1 level specifically.
Yeah.
So it's not a lot.
Yeah. And it's not just 1 out of 100 in your small school. It's one, like think about yourself against every single high level athlete in your state. It's not you comparing yourself just against your high school.
Right, exactly. And these college coaches, even the smaller colleges, they all recruit nationally. So maybe you're the best on your team, or you're the best in your county, or even the best in your state. You're pitted against the entire country. So it is challenging to be recruited.
For sure. So we have a lot of things going on. We've got roster spots that are shrinking. We have colleges that are shutting down complete programs. Like I've seen soccer programs get shut down. I've seen a lot of others. Baseball. What's your? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what's your expectation in the next few years of even if we look at say 2028, like what is that? What do those percentages look like? Do you think?
You're right. I don't have a crystal ball, but I live in this space every day. So there are some bigger picture things going on. The first thing is youth sports, high school sports are just continuing to grow, which is great, right? Like think about all of the things you high school athletes learn being involved in a sport. So there's just more and more participation at the high school level, even more than there was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So high school sports are still growing. And now, like you said, some of the college sports are actually shrinking. Colleges are really evaluating, especially post-COVID, really evaluating the way they use their resources. So the way the college is using their facilities, right? Of course, their budget in just a bigger picture, and kind of cutting sports that maybe don't make sense for them. But it's not like you're running around everywhere and sports are being cut. It's just a small trend. The other big factor, the bigger picture here, there are some NCAA rule changes coming, specifically at the Division 1 level, that's going to include roster limits. So coaches that may have taken a bigger roster and more what's called walk-ons, players that aren't on a scholarship, those spots are going to be eliminated. So those rosters are going to be smaller. So I think as these next years come up, like I said, with more and more high school athletes and now less roster spots, that percentage of high school athletes moving on to the college level is going to decrease.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's crazy too on the football side of things. Like I know you do volleyball, but I have athletes who do football, and even football is shrinking. And we talk about football being like the big money maker in college, and it's like even they aren't immune to this. So I think that's a huge thing to highlight. So regardless of what sport you play, you're at risk.
Huge. Yeah, the landscape's changing. A lot of the other scouts I work with are involved in football, and I know it's been a tricky process to navigate from the prospective student athlete in high school all the way to the college coaches. They're still trying to figure it out as we're moving into the next calendar year with these new rules coming up. And let me tell you this, these rules are going to change. And then the next calendar year, there's probably going to be another rule change and another one. It's just the NCAA is like always evolving and always adapting, their recruiting rules, their scholarship rules, and just overall their operations. So it's a moving target.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get into what can we do about it. So first thing I want to highlight, because I know that you talk about character a lot when it comes to the recruiting process. How much weight do college coaches place on athlete character when they're evaluating them, when they're recruiting them?
It's huge, right? So we're talking about, we're going to just take the average 5%, 5 out of 100 players going on to the college level. Okay, so it's not enough to just be a good player. There's plenty and plenty and plenty of really good players out there. So you got to have the total package, right? Coaches are looking for your leadership on the court, your attentiveness when you're on the sidelines, the way you interact with your coach, the way you interact with your parents, just things that are visible when they watch you play that are just high character items. And then coaches are taking a lot of time to get to know players. So they're corresponding and following these players for years. So it's all about building that relationship. So coach is evaluating the prospective student athlete throughout that relationship to make sure they are high character and that is a personality that's going to fit in. So I would say it's just as important as your abilities on the court or the field or the ice or whatever sport you play.
Yeah. So what are some key things that you would say, like within the character piece, like how can athletes stand out in that area?
So if coach is recruiting you, coach is going to come see you play live. And that's towards the end. A lot of people get that wrong and think that's how coach is going to find you. That's not it. Coaches are going to come see you play live. And you need these character pieces to be habits, right? How are you going to just turn it on when someone shows up? So when you're out in your sport, right, little things you can do, be engaged with your teammates, right? High-fiving them, looking them in the eyes, asking your coach questions, listening to coach during timeouts. Another big one, I know a lot of college coaches that watch warm-ups. So for, high school athletes, are you, in your headphones, not engaging with your team, doing your own thing, or are you running around goofing off? Or, right, are you locked in, engaging with everybody, taking your stretching, for example, or your dynamic warm-up seriously, not just going through the motions? Just that all of these little pieces of being an elite athlete are really ingrained in your habits that are showing your character and showing you're a good teammate.
All right, so let's talk evaluation. So, for athletes just starting out, how should they approach getting an honest evaluation of their skills and potential? Because I know, you might get a not so honest evaluation depending on who you're talking to, as somebody that you're paying to train you versus somebody else. So, how do you get an honest evaluation?
Yes. So first I want to emphasize like the importance of getting evaluated, right? So right now where as an athlete, where you sit in your sport, really hard to understand the way you fit in nationally, right? Outside of your high school, outside of your county, outside of your district, outside of your state. Um, and then how to fit into the college level, right? You may not know the difference in skill between Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, the NAI, JUCO, the junior colleges. There's a lot to figure out, and it's really, really, really hard to figure it out yourself as an athlete or as a parent where your athlete fits. And then from there, that evaluation can help you know where you can get recruited, where that's a good fit. So the evaluation is super, super important. And that's what I actually spend a lot of time doing. I travel the country at volleyball events and help athletes get recruited, yes, but I also evaluate them. And I'm able to give them a really objective evaluation. Because even when I coached, right, I was a college coach for 12 years. Clearly, I thought my players were good. Obviously, they had some things to work on, and I could give them that, but I still thought they were better than some of the other players we played against. So it was really hard for me being their coach to be objective, and that was at a high level. Okay, so there's some really amazing high school coaches out there and travel ball coaches out there, but it is hard for them to see it all on a bigger level. So it's really good to talk to a professional. We have scouts across the country in every single sport that evaluate athletes and help them figure out that first step. So I highly recommend it. And then you should also do athletes a little bit of self evaluation too. Like, are you really that number one out of 100? Okay, if you want to be, what can you do to get there? But are you really? I mean, you can find film of your sport, right? The power of YouTube now. Everything's on YouTube. To look up like different recorded games at the college level. And if, you're watching, for example, volleyball, we're into the NCAA tournament now. Nebraska is up there. Texas is a reigning champ. So if you're watching them and you're seeing athletes that are 6'4", 6'5", touching around almost 11 feet, some of them, and you're 5'7", with a different skill set, you got to be a little honest with yourself. Step one. And then step two, right? There's still a ton of programs that could be a really good fit for you. So step two is to get evaluated by a professional and help direct that process, because you could go crazy thinking about the thousands of programs out there at the college level.
Yeah. So do you know, just because I know we have a mixed sport audience, do you know evaluators for other sports too?
Yes, NSR has college scouts for every sport, all the way down to bass fishing and equestrian, which are some small participation at the college level, but there are college programs for those sports. So we've got it covered.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you talk about evaluation as the first step of 4 steps when we talk about athletes wanting to play in college. Can you dig more into the next steps?
So first step is to really get evaluated, figure out where you fit. Okay, the next step, again, this is such a small amount of athletes that actually get recruited. So this overarching step throughout the whole process is to be on top of your game, right? You can't just be good at your sport. Your grades have to be elite. Your SAT or ACT score has to be high. You need to take it early. You need to take it often, get the highest score you can get, right? Your sleep, your nutrition, your training needs to be there. So it's all of these pieces as you're going about the process. But from there, coaches start this recruiting process early. So athletes that think they want to play in college, they cannot wait until senior year. The recruiting process is practically, if not completely, over come senior year. So first step, right after they get evaluated, they need to get evaluated early. And then they need to start figuring out what pieces of colleges like they're really interested in, right? So location, size, major actually doesn't even matter too much, because over half of college students change their major in college. Did you change your major, Nick, or were you on this path forever?
I graduated in 6 years instead of 4 years, so that was
Okay. Yeah, so you're a prime example. We didn't even set that up. So yeah, and it's not just Nick, it's a lot of college students, right? So not making major be the deciding factor in your college search. So step two is to be doing your research and figuring out what's a good fit, and then starting to connect with college coaches early. Realistically, this is where I help a lot of my athletes, because college coaches get hundreds of emails a week from athletes, and they just can't open them all. They don't open them all. They don't correspond with everybody. So this is the part where I help my athletes connect with the right coaches, more of like the who and help them in that sense. So you've got to get that conversation going with college coaches early. And then from there, each coach will kind of guide you through the process. And there's a couple stages that will happen later on and get to an offer, but it's not all linear. Everyone's journey is a little bit different. There can be a lot to navigate. So I also recommend making sure you have someone in your corner that really understands how this all works.
You talk about starting this process early and recognizing like where you're at. Nowadays we have so many different specialists. I know I'm technically a specialist as a dietitian. Something you see at the college levels, it's become more normal, especially D1. But you also have the mindset, speed, you have all these different things. Like, What's your, especially when you talk about the stats and how they're probably going to get harder and harder to get to those higher levels, what's your take on all of the different like extra roles?
I think that is so smart. And I was a college professor too, and I need it like stamped on my forehead or a shirt that says use your resources. So I think that if there's an area either you get evaluated and learn that you're lacking in, like your speed, right? Or you can identify that you or parents that your child's, lacking in their nutrition or their sleep and recovery. So if you can identify that area or have a professional identify that area, use your resources, hire a coach, hire someone that is an expert in that field to bump that up. I see absolutely only positives to having a whole team of people behind you, because once you're in college as a college athlete, you're going to have a team like that as well. So you can start now. Yeah.
For sure. Awesome. So that was an impromptu question. So we talk about general recruiting. I want to talk, because volleyball is your bread and butter, your thing. I want to talk about that a little bit. And you talk about film. So what are some key things in the volleyball recruiting world that coaches are going to be catching when it comes to that film?
Okay. So before I get even volleyball specific, you are in high school and you want to play your sport, whatever sport in college, you need to be sitting here right now with film you could immediately send to a coach with a highlight reel. Okay. If you don't have that, you're behind the 8 ball. Okay. Coaches are not going to recruit you without film, and the process starts early. So even if you're a freshman, they want it now. So that film is hugely important. But volleyball specific, or actually, before we even get volleyball specific, one more piece. College coaches, again, get hundreds of emails from athletes, lots and lots of highlight reels. Okay. You need to be getting that reel to the right coaches so they talk to you. And that's where scouts come in. But also, you have about 2 minutes, sometimes even less. The coach, on average, will watch a highlight reel. It's like 2 minutes and 28 seconds is like the statistical average. So don't warm up to your best plays. Like you got to stack those good plays, those true highlights in the beginning. And then the other thing to consider, and especially volleyball, because it's such an angle specific sport, like the way the game is played on angles and visions, right? With the net and just a lot going on in a very small space. Number one tip for volleyball film, in addition to the general tips, is make sure you're recording behind the end line, right? If a college coach opens your highlight reel and it's some like whack angle where it's impossible to see the whole court, they're not going to watch it. They're not wasting their 2 minutes and 28 seconds. Volleyball specifically, your side of the court behind that end line is huge. And then you can take that into other sports too, right? You need to see the whole court. You need to see most of the play, not just that fraction of a second where you made the tackle, right? You need to kind of see it a little bit longer, a little bit wider, and from a really good angle so coach can see other parts of the game too. And then from there, this is what I help my athletes with a lot. Just it's very position specific what coaches are looking for. So we could dive into that with each athlete, and really, but my goal is to showcase their strengths, showcase the key factors of the position, and put the best place first.
Yeah. So I'm not as well versed in volleyball, but when I think about football, for example, when you talk about that position specific, I really like when a football lineman is showing film and it's, the plays going on over here, but they are still taking their guy out like an offensive lineman, and it's like, so what are some examples of that in volleyball where it's, you may not be the center of the play, but it's, you're playing a crucial role?
So volleyball can be somewhat similar. Even if you're involved in the play, you touch the ball for hundredths of a second, right? It's a rebound sport. The ball's never truly in your possession. You're just touching it. Okay, so there's a lot more that goes into the play. So coaches want to see your movement patterns on the court, right? So I'm going to get real technical here, right? There's base, and then you make whatever play you need to play. So base, you need to see you transition to defense, make the dig, move into cover, go back to base. The 2 seconds of you, 1 second of you touching the ball isn't a lot. So I think that relates to your football analogy, right? You're trying to see the broader play, but also what's going on the other side of the court, right? Are you making the right play? Are you in the right position? And are you in the right position consistently, or are you just like getting lucky sometimes? Yeah, coaches are looking for you to be paying attention to the actual play that's unfolding and then using the right skills in your toolbox. Yeah, yeah. And I work on this a lot with my athletes because I've watched at this point 13 years of highlights, right? From being a head coach all the way up until now. And there's a lot of players with film out there that's impacting them negatively. I see their film and then I see them play live and I'm like, whoa, like you are a lot better live. So coaches are watching that highlight reel that's whatever, low quality, wrong plays, whatever, and deciding to not come see you play live, deciding to not recruit you. So you need to keep an eye on that and make sure that your film is helping you and not hurting you.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's definitely a case with all sports. And it goes back to the character thing too. It's not just about like, are you showing up well, are you doing those things well, or are you showing up on film causing a penalty or whatever it might be, type of thing, like just by accident. Are you on somebody else's film making those mistakes?
Yeah, yeah. I do know some volleyball coaches that will ask for full game film too, but that's not first, right? They are not going to spend 45 minutes if they don't know you deciding to recruit you or not. They're going to, if they've gotten your film and paid attention to you, watch for 2 minutes and be like, okay, let's see more. Like some will ask for full game film to see exactly that. Like, are you hitting 10 balls out of bounds and 1 ball in, similar to what you're talking about?
For sure. And then what about, so when it comes to getting on a coach's watch list, I know this is one that you've talked about a bit too. You talk about the importance of this before the events that you're going to, especially some of those major events. I'll leave it open to you of like how you want to dig into that one.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to speak specifically to volleyball in my example here, but if you play another sport, you can kind of extrapolate. So volleyball tournaments at the travel level, the club level, they are huge. There's about 100 courts typically in a convention center. Okay, 100 courts, 5 teams per court in the morning, 5 teams per court in the evening. So you could do the math. That's a lot of teams, a lot of courts, a lot of space. The college coaches are not just arriving at the event and wandering around 100 courts to see who they like. Okay. They are going there to see more of players that they've learned about, that they've identified as a recruit, and then that they've evaluated, they've watched the highlight reel, and now decided to come and watch more. Some events will publish the list of the college coaches that are coming. And if you get that list and email coaches the night before, their list is already made, their schedule is already made. They're probably not adding you. Okay, so you're not on the watch list. So you're not getting added 24 hours before, and you're not going to be found just at this massive event. There is a very, very slim chance, but that's like the Michael Jordan chance, right? Somebody discovered Michael Jordan. We're not all Michael Jordan, but mainly you need to be on their watch list beforehand. And these coaches will have watch lists of players that they've been corresponding with, either talking directly to or talking to their coaches or their scout for a year. And now they're coming to see them play. So there's a lot of work that goes into it on the recruiting side between an athlete and their coach and their scout before that event even comes up. I feel so strongly about this, and it's such a big misconception that I can go on and on and on.
Yeah, and it's funny though because like I see it and hear it all the time. Like I have conversations with athletes in any sport, and they're talking about like getting discovered and things like that. And it's like, well, first of all, now it is. I mean, social media is such a big thing that like it's hard to like be hidden essentially. But at the same time, if you're not putting in the work, especially when you're in, like you said, that crowded space where there's so many other athletes that they're trying to look at, like chances of them, just happening to see your one play for that half a
Yeah,
second or that, couple seconds
right.
type of thing, it's very slim.
Yeah, and that's really unique to volleyball, right? Like football, there's one game on one field. So a college coach is going to be there for how long is a football game, right? Hours looking at the same guys. But with 100 courts going on, coach is not going to just sit at one spot for 2 hours to pick people out. They're moving.
Yeah. When I could see that being a case in other sports too, like I'm trying to think of, I feel like
Basketball,
baseball and in some of those things for sure, like when
baseball,
there's
yeah.
yeah.
softball, right? When there's like any big facility with multiple, even soccer has some really big tournaments.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, soccer, you got like multiple games going on at the same
Mhm.
time. And yeah, definitely. So I want to give you space to talk, number one, to just the athlete in general, like any athlete trying to get to that college level, what your main piece of advice would be. And then to the volleyball player, what would be your main piece of advice for them?
Yes. Okay. I'm sitting here telling you the chances of being recruited are really slim. Okay. And I don't mean that to discourage anyone. I want it to highlight the fact that you need to know your facts, know how it all works. This is why I exist, right? And the rest of NSR, we help people with this. But you need to know your facts and truly know how it all works. And then you need to put work into it. Recruiting doesn't just happen to you. If you want to play in college, it's not going to just happen to you, right? You have to be taking action and taking steps. And you need to be taking action early in your college career. Early in your high school career and continuing that action. You can't just take action twice a year. It's every week, sometimes every day, a little bit of work. So I know you and I have talked about this before. I like nerd out on schedules and structures and time management and measurable goals. I know you do too. So I advise athletes to kind of treat their recruiting as another class. So at least once a week, if not more often, you should be sitting down to do your homework for that class. So you should be sitting down to do something in your recruiting. And that's what I help my athletes with a lot too, figuring out, okay, yeah, I'm sitting down, but what do I do? Which is all different. Everyone's recruiting journey is different. So I don't have a blanket answer for that. But big piece of advice is to sit down, make it happen each week, and continue to be really proactive until you get those offers.
Yeah, I love that because I actually just literally like before this started, I read the first 10 pages of Atomic Habits.
Yes.
And it's one of those things where, and I also went live about this yesterday, is like, we're recording this early December. We still have 20-ish days left of December that you can be taking steps. You have a whole 2 weeks of winter break that, yes, you may be training, you might do your usual things, but if you can do one different thing, like, hey, maybe you connect with those coaches on Twitter, maybe you send out some emails, maybe you draft those emails, you put them together. You don't want to send them on Christmas Eve, but like you can send them at a time where they're actually going to see it. Just develop those habits, develop those things, because like you said, when you're on the field about character, like those things, when they become second nature to you, your brain thinks about it less. So it's less effort for you to put in those.
Yes. And it's so good to be working on your recruiting in December. Look, the college coaches, they never stop. They're recruiting all through December. They're probably not talking to you or talking to anybody or doing any recruiting on Christmas Day, but it's not slowing down. It's such a competitive field out here that all the college coaches are still really working on their recruiting. So you can't just wait till January for any habit, never mind recruiting too.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of athletes, I know you guys might feel stressed out. You might feel like there's so many things you have to do as an athlete. Sam and I were just talking about just the 8-hour school day on top of trying to fit everything else in sports wise.
Yeah.
And so again, the more that you can turn these things into habits, the less your brain has to think about it. So naturally, you're going to have less stress.
Yeah. And then my number one piece of advice for volleyball athletes that aspire to play in college, both men and women. I recruit both. I, help both men and women volleyball players. Volleyball players are very smart. The GPAs I'm seeing on a national scale are really high. So volleyball players, you need to get A's and B's. You cannot slack. Your GPA has to be so solid, right? Because if you're at this level on the court and you're, same position, same grad years at the same level as you on the court, but this other guy has a higher GPA, coach is going to recruit the higher GPA. So if yours is slacking, you're not going to get recruited. And volleyball is just so high right now. So that high GPA and a high SAT or ACT score is going to really help in the recruiting process. And a low GPA or a low SAT, ACT score is going to hinder you. So academics are just as important as your volleyball skill.
Yeah. One, and when we talk about scholarships too, you get more scholarship opportunities when you have good grades. So, stack on saving money.
Right. on Division 1, right? They're the only division that offers complete athletic scholarships, and that's still 1 out of 100 people. So everyone else is looking at, academic scholarships, and the higher your grades, the more academic scholarship money you can be awarded.
Yeah. Any last pieces of advice before we wrap up? I just want to make sure I
Nope,
sum it
those
all.
are the big ones. I'm a teacher for life, so I'm going to sit here and tell everyone to study and study and study and organize their time.
Yes, I love it. So Sam, thanks so much for joining us today. Like, for those listening, you can tell, number one, how much Sam cares about this, but how much she's invested like mentally around this and how much she cares about you guys and helping you succeed. So go check out Sam on her social media. In the show notes, you'll see her socials. But yeah, I highly recommend even just following her. She has a lot of great content, just like we talked about today.
Thanks, Nick. And yeah, it's not only volleyball, right? You can take this recruiting advice to other sports too. So if you're a volleyball player with questions, please feel free to reach out. Plenty of athletes DM me with questions. And if you're not a volleyball athlete, you can still ask me questions. So I'm here to help.
Yes, definitely. So for listeners, again, definitely check Sam out. Definitely start that process now, regardless of what your age is, regardless of where you're at. Like, just start that process, start developing those habits and setting yourself up for success. Because like Sam said, it's getting harder and harder. Until next time, keep striving for greatness.